Has this ever happened to you? You're with a man, and for a time, the world feels perfectly aligned. His presence feels like a balm, a safe harbor from the world's chaos. He sees you, truly sees you, or so you believe. He affirms your dreams, reflects your light back to you, and in his admiration, you find a sense of completeness that was previously unknown. The initial passion is a wildfire, an intoxicating force that burns through the mundane and promises an eternal spring. You feel seen, desired, and validated, and you mistake this external validation for an inner strength. This is the myth of the anima projection, a powerful, magnetic force that draws two souls together. The man, in his unconscious, projects onto the woman an image of his inner feminine, his anima, the wellspring of his creativity, his emotional depth, and his soulful connection to the world. And the woman, in turn, receives this projection, embracing the role of the muse, the goddess, the perfect companion. She becomes a living mirror, reflecting back the best parts of his unintegrated self. For a while, this dance is beautiful, it feels like destiny, but it is, at its core, an illusion. The danger lies not in the initial connection, but in the foundation it is built upon. This union is often not rooted in the reality of two whole, individuated beings, but in the symbiotic reliance on each other's projections. A woman who has not yet fully embraced her own wholeness, her own inner masculine and feminine, may unconsciously seek a man who can provide the missing pieces. She may give him the power to define her worth, to validate her existence. She becomes the keeper of his emotional life, and in turn, he becomes the guardian of her self-esteem. This is where the Stoic wisdom of Seneca comes into stark relief. He who is brave is free. True freedom is not the absence of external constraints, but the liberation from internal dependencies. When a woman's happiness is tethered to a man's perception of her, she is not free. She is a prisoner of his gaze, a slave to his approval. Her well-being is held in a fragile vessel that he can, intentionally or not, shatter at any moment. This is a subtle but profound form of emotional slavery, a quiet surrender of one's sovereignty. The moment this projection begins to fade is often marked by a sense of profound disillusionment. The initial wildfire of passion starts to wane, not because love has died, but because the illusion that fueled it is beginning to dissolve. The man begins to see the woman not just as his ideal, but as a complex human being with her own flaws, her own shadow. He may withdraw, become critical, or seek the projection elsewhere. And the woman, stripped of the validation that had become her emotional lifeblood, may experience a profound sense of loss and confusion. She may double down on efforts to reclaim the projection, to once again be his muse, his goddess. But this is a futile and self-defeating endeavor. This is the critical turning point, the moment of truth. The relationship can either descend into a codependent stagnation, a bitter dance of unfulfilled expectations and silent resentments, or it can evolve. The path to evolution is the path of individuation. It requires the woman to turn inward, to do the profound and often painful work of retrieving her own projections. She must confront the shadow within herself, the parts of her that are angry, selfish, insecure, and imperfect. She must stop seeking a man to complete her and begin the arduous journey of becoming complete in herself. This is a heroic act, a defiance of the cultural narrative that tells her she must be chosen to be whole. The question then becomes, can a relationship survive the death of a beautiful illusion? Can two people who once relied on each other's light to see themselves now stand in their own power and still choose to walk a path together? This is the crucible where passion is not merely kept alive, but forged anew, transformed from a fleeting wildfire into a profound and enduring flame. This is where the shadow descends. The initial shock of the fading illusion forces a woman to confront the unintegrated parts of herself that she so desperately sought to fill with another's presence. She must now face her own insecurities, her unhealed wounds, the parts of her that feel unworthy or unlovable. This is not a man's fault to fix, it is her own sacred work to undertake. The mirror that was his adoring gaze has been removed, and she is left to gaze into the depths of her own soul, where the real work of self-love and self-acceptance begins. The temptation, in this moment of vulnerability, is to regress, to chase the fleeting highs of a new projection, a new man who will see her as a goddess, a muse, the perfect reflection of his unconscious. This is the tragic cycle that traps so many, a frantic, desperate search for external validation that only deepens the internal void. The Stoics understood this well. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The man who is not a good man cannot have a good reputation." He would have argued that a woman who has not built her own foundation of self-worth cannot truly have a healthy relationship. The external reputation, the validation from a partner, is a hollow echo of the inner state. True worth is an internal substance, a quality of being that is forged in the fire of self-confrontation, not gifted by another. This is the psychological terrain of the trauma bond, a dark distortion of the initial projection. When a woman's self-worth is contingent on the approval of a man, she may become ensnared in a cycle of intermittent validation and devaluing. He pulls away, and her anxiety spikes. She feels the desperate need to win him back. He returns with a morsel of affection, and her body floods with a neurochemical reward of relief, a hit of dopamine that her psyche misinterprets as love. This isn't a healthy dynamic. It's a form of emotional addiction, a cruel and relentless cycle of hope and despair. The passion is not an expression of two souls uniting, but a frantic dance of two wounded egos trying to survive. This is where the man's shadow meets her unhealed inner child, creating a vortex of codependency that feels like destiny, but is in fact a shared prison. The only way out of this labyrinth is through the deliberate, conscious act of retrieving the projections. She must ask herself, what parts of myself did I give to him to hold? What qualities did I admire in him that are actually my own unintegrated strengths? The man's logic, his ambition, his sense of purpose, his boundaries. These are not external qualities to be worshipped in him, but aspects of her own animus that she has yet to embody. The animus is not a monster to be tamed, but a source of inner strength, a bridge to her own conscious and purposeful action. This process is not an act of selfishness, but of ultimate self-respect. It is the practice of emotional detachment, not as a cold and barren state, but as a courageous act of setting oneself free. It is the understanding that you cannot truly love another until you are no longer dependent on their presence for your own sense of wholeness. True love, the kind that endures, is not a desperate clutch, but an expansive generosity. It is two whole and complete individuals choosing to share their lives, not two halves clinging to each other to avoid a terrifying emptiness. The woman who has done this work becomes a force of nature, a wellspring of her own validation, an anchor in her own being. She no longer seeks a king to give her a kingdom. She builds her own, and only then does she invite a true partner to share in its bounty. The process of retrieving one's projections is not a passive act of introspection, but an active, even defiant, re-engagement with the world. A woman in this stage is not merely a patient on a couch, she is a warrior on a quest. She begins to consciously embody the qualities she once projected onto her partner. If she admired his decisiveness, she begins to make her own decisions with unwavering clarity. If she saw in him a sense of purpose and direction, she now charts her own course, untethered from his approval. This is the integration of the animus, the bridge between the inner world of her soul and the outer world of her actions. It is a powerful, alchemical process that transforms her from an object of desire into a subject of her own life. This is where the wisdom of Epictetus, the Stoic slave who became a philosopher, offers a profound and radical freedom. He taught that true freedom lies in distinguishing between what is within our power and what is not. A man's love, his desire, his opinion of you, these are not within your power. Your self-respect, your commitment to your own growth, your ability to find purpose and meaning from within these are entirely within your power. The woman who grasps this distinction is liberated. She no longer chases an outcome she cannot control. She no longer spends her emotional energy trying to manipulate another's feelings. Instead, she directs her energy inward, building a fortress of self-worth that no external force can breach. The paradox is that this very act of self-liberation is what often reignites the spark in a relationship, but on a much deeper, more authentic level. When a woman ceases to be a living mirror for a man's projections, she forces him to confront his own inner world. He can no longer lean on her to hold the fragile pieces of his own unintegrated self. He is now faced with a choice, to flee and find a new projection, or to do his own soul work. This is the moment of truth for the masculine. Will he retreat into a safe, familiar comfort zone, or will he rise to meet her at this new level of conscious being? The re-attraction is not a desperate plea. It is a profound respect for her wholeness. He is no longer drawn to a woman who needs him to complete her, but to a woman who is already complete. He is no longer the hero of her story, but a potential companion in a life she is already living with grace and power. The passion that returns is not the hungry fire of two people desperately trying to fill a void. It is the steady, illuminating flame of two independent suns in a shared orbit, each radiating their own light and warmth. This new dynamic is a dance of two individuated souls, not a frantic tangle of two wounded egos. It is a profound co-creation, a shared journey of two people who see each other not as saviors or muses, but as fellow travelers on the path of becoming. But this evolution is not for the faint of heart. It requires the courage to stand alone, to face the abyss of your own existence, and find that you are, and always have been, enough. This is a rejection of the patriarchal narrative that tells a woman her value is in being chosen. It is an embrace of a far more ancient truth, that her value is intrinsic, and her purpose is not to be a half, but a whole. This is the path of the hero's journey for the feminine, a quest not for a dragon to slay, but for a soul to reclaim. The true alchemy of this new dynamic lies in the conscious integration of the shadow. She no longer hides the parts of herself that she deems unlovable or unacceptable, the anger, the messiness, the raw, untamed aspects of her being. She brings them into the light, accepting them as essential parts of her wholeness. This is the ultimate act of self-love, and it is also what allows a man to truly see her for the first time. He is no longer relating to a flawless ideal, but to a complex, powerful, and flawed human being. This authenticity is a profoundly attractive force, far more potent than the initial fragile perfection of the projection. The relationship, in this phase, is not about two people becoming one, but about two distinct individuals standing side by side, each a sovereign nation unto themselves. The passion is no longer a desperate hunger, but a deliberate and conscious choice. It is the recognition of another's journey and the profound honor of being a witness to it. The sexual intimacy, too, is transformed. It moves beyond a physical release or a means of seeking validation. It becomes a sacred, soulful communion between two whole beings, a shared expression of their individual power and a celebration of their union. It is a dance of two suns, each radiating their own light, creating a brilliant and self-sustaining solar system. This is the ultimate evolution of love. It is the death of codependency and the birth of conscious partnership. It is the rejection of the fairy tale narrative that a man will complete you and the embrace of a far more courageous truth, that you are already complete and a man's presence is a gift, not a necessity. This is the Stoic ideal of emotional freedom, not as a cold detachment from life, but as an unbreakable core of self-possession. It is the understanding that your inner peace is not a negotiation with an external force, but an internal certainty. The final triumph is the realization that your love for another is not a transaction, but an overflowing from the well of your own self-love. You no longer give to receive, you give because you are full. You no longer fear losing him, because you have already found yourself. This is the essence of mature passion, not a frantic grasp, but a gentle, secure embrace. It is the quiet confidence of a woman who knows her own worth, who is not defined by her relationship status, but by the depth of her own soul. This is the art of evolving together, a shared journey into the sacred wildness of your own becoming.